The night my father accused me of stealing from my own grandfather, the entire family was watching. 30 relatives crowded around a Thanksgiving table while he stood at the head like a judge delivering a sentence. In his hand was a white envelope. He slid it toward me across the table and announced, calmly and confidently, "Our daughter is a thief. And we have proof." Inside the envelope was a court summons. Every pair of eyes in the room turned to me. My mother was already crying, tears running down her face like she had rehearsed the moment. The room was silent, waiting for me to panic or confess. Instead, I smiled. Because 4 months earlier, I had hired someone whose entire job was tracing where money disappears. And what she uncovered didn't just clear my name. It shattered a story my parents had been carefully building since the day my grandfather died.
I'm Ilya.
I'm 32 years old, a registered nurse from a small town in Georgia. To understand how I ended up sitting at that table with my own father accusing me of theft, you have to go back 8 months, to the week my grandfather Earl Palmer was buried. Grandpa Earl died on a Tuesday in March. He was 84. Pneumonia, they said. Quick at the end. I drove 3 hours from my apartment to the funeral home in Dawson, Georgia. It's the kind of place where everyone knows your family history and your credit score. I grew up there. My grandfather practically raised me half the time. He taught me how to read while we sat on his porch, took me fishing every summer at Lake Blackshear until I hit 15, and decided I was suddenly too cool for it. When I got accepted into nursing school, he mailed me a card with a $50 check inside. On the memo line he wrote, "Proud of you, Offie." But during the last 3 years of his life, something changed. I called him. No answer. I sent letters, birthday cards, photos from work, Christmas notes every December. Nothing came back. No reply. No return mail. Just silence. I told myself maybe he was getting older, maybe confused, maybe upset about something I didn't understand. At the funeral, my father, Gerald, stood at the podium and delivered a eulogy that could have earned applause. His voice cracked at the right moments, his eyes filled with tears as he said, "My father was the greatest man I ever knew." I sat in the third row. No one asked me to sit closer. After the service, Gerald gathered the family in the hallway of the church. My brother Nolan, a few cousins, and me. He straightened his tie and said it simply. Dad left everything to me. The house, the savings, all of it. That was his final wish. No one questioned it. I almost didn't either. But the way he said it felt wrong. Too smooth. Too prepared. Like a doctor reading numbers from a chart that didn't quite match the patient. To understand why that moment bothered me so much, you need to go back 10 years. I was 22, fresh out of nursing school, working brutal 12-hour shifts at the county hospital while student loans were already knocking at the door. I lived in a small apartment with another nurse and ate frozen burritos most nights because they were cheap. One Sunday evening, my father called and told me to come to the house. When I arrived, he was sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of paperwork. My mother, Denise, sat beside him with red eyes. "We just need your help," he said gently. "Just your signature. The bank needs a co-signer for the mortgage. It's temporary. 6 months, maybe less. Then I'll refinance, and your name comes off." My mother dabbed her eyes and whispered, "We could lose the house, Oilia." So I signed. 6 months turned into a year. A year turned into 5. 5 became 10. Every time I asked when my name would come off the mortgage, the answer was always the same. "My credit isn't there yet." Or worse, "You want us on the street?" And every single time, my mother cried like clockwork. That one signature cost me almost everything financially. I couldn't qualify for my own mortgage. I couldn't get a decent car loan. My credit score bounced between 580 and 620 because Gerald kept missing payments without telling me. I would find out from alerts in the middle of the night. 30 days late. Sometimes 60. When I confronted him, he shrugged it off. Things were tight. I handled it. He handled it with my name. 2 weeks after my grandfather's funeral, I finally sat across from Gerald at his kitchen table and told him plainly, "Dad, I need my name off that mortgage this year." His expression hardened immediately. "Now isn't the time," he said. "I just buried my father. I know, I told him. But it's been 10 years. The chair scraped loudly as he stood up. You expect me to refinance right now? With what credit? You think banks are lining up for a 61-year-old retired insurance man? Then sell the house, I said. Downsize. I don't care how. I just need off that loan. He leaned forward, eyes cold. You want to talk about lawyers? Go ahead. Sue your own parents. See how that looks. I never mentioned lawyers. He did. But that didn't stop what came next. Within 3 days, relatives started calling. My Aunt Marlene texted me saying I should be ashamed. My cousin Megan left a voicemail asking why I was trying to take my parents' house. Even distant relatives called to lecture me about family loyalty. Every single one of them had heard the same story, the version my parents told them. According to Gerald and Denise, I was the ungrateful daughter trying to throw them out of their home right after Grandpa died. Then my father called me again. His voice was flat and cold. You think you're the only one who can play games, he said. Your grandfather left everything to me. And if you keep pushing, everyone's going to know what you really did with his money. I had no idea what he was talking about. I had never touched a cent. But by then, I realized something terrifying. He wasn't just defending himself. He was building a story. And in our town, once a story takes root, the truth doesn't stand much of a chance. It's not his handwriting. Linda said it calmly, like she was stating a simple fact. I stared at her across the desk. You're sure? I'm sure. She turned another page in the report and slid it toward me. The next section wasn't about handwriting. It was about money. Your grandfather's savings account held $280,000 when he died, she said. The house was valued at about $190,000. Total estate value, roughly $470,000. My stomach tightened. After probate closed, she continued, tapping the page, Gerald withdrew $350,000 in several transactions. Every dollar had been mapped. $120,000 paid off his personal credit card debt. $85,000 cleared the loan on his truck. $60,000 was transferred into an account under my mother's name. $45,000 went to a contractor for home renovations. And $40,000 had been pulled out in cash. Untraceable. I stared at the numbers until they blurred. He forged the will, I said quietly, and took $350,000. Linda nodded once. Do you want me to compile this into a formal report? She asked. Because once I do, this becomes something you can't walk back. I didn't hesitate. Do it. She closed the folder. Give me 10 days. 10 days. 3 days before Thanksgiving. $350,000. That wasn't panic. That was planning. A few days later, I found myself thinking about someone my grandfather used to mention now, and then his sister Ruth. Whenever he talked about her, he'd shake his head and say, Ruth's got more sense than the rest of us combined. Ruth Palmer was 74 and lived alone in Americus, about 40 minutes south of Dawson. She hadn't attended a family dinner in nearly a decade. Something had happened between her and my father years ago, but no one ever explained it. I found her number in my grandfather's old address book, the one I'd kept after the funeral. When I called, she answered on the second ring. Mrs. Palmer, this is Oilia, Earl's granddaughter. There was a long silence. Then she said softly, Earl told me you'd call one day. The words knocked the air out of me. What do you mean? Your grandpa gave me something 3 years ago, she said. Told me to keep it safe. Said if anything went wrong after he passed, you'd come looking. She asked me to come by that Saturday. I drove to her house with my heart pounding so hard my hands felt numb. Ruth opened the door, studied my face for a long moment, then handed me a yellowed envelope. Inside was a handwritten will. My grandfather's handwriting. Shaky, slanted, completely unmistakable. 2 neighbors had signed as witnesses. The date was 5 years before his death. The contents were simple. Everything divided equally between 4 grandchildren, me, Nolan, Travis, and Megan. Not Gerald. I looked up at Ruth. She lowered herself slowly into a chair. Gerald visited your grandpa every week those last 3 years, she said. Told Earl you didn't want to see him anymore. Said you'd moved on with your life. My chest tightened. My grandfather hadn't stopped answering me. My father had stopped him. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, my phone rang at 10:14 at night. It was Nolan. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly. His voice sounded tense, like he was speaking somewhere he shouldn't. "Don't ask how I know this," he continued. "Okay. 2 months ago, I went to the house to grab my drill set from the garage. I came through the side door, and Mom and Dad were in the kitchen. They didn't hear me." He paused, breathing slowly. Dad said, "She can't prove anything. The will is filed. It's done." I gripped the couch cushion beneath my hand. And Mom asked, "What if she gets a lawyer?" Another pause. And Dad said, "Then we go louder. We make her the villain. Nobody's going to believe her over us." The room around me went silent. "Nolan," I said slowly, "tell me you recorded that." I hit record the second I heard them arguing. He sent the audio file while we were still on the phone. When I pressed play, my father's voice filled my apartment. Muffled, distant, but unmistakable. My mother's voice followed, saying exactly what Nolan described. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked. He was quiet for a long time. "Because I was scared, Oilia," he finally said. "They're my parents too. I didn't know what to do." I understood. Fear doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like 2 months of silence while you carry a recording on your phone, like a grenade you're afraid to throw. "Thank you," I said. That took guts. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But I'm not going to Thanksgiving empty-handed." A few days later, I sat across from an estate attorney named Harlan Bates in Albany. His office had wood-paneled walls and a University of Georgia diploma behind his desk. I placed everything in front of him. Linda's forensic report, the handwritten will from Ruth, the probate file, and Nolan's recording. He read for nearly 40 minutes without saying a word. Finally, he leaned back in his chair. "This is fraud," he said plainly. "Forgé de signature. False probate filing. Misappropriation of estate assets." "So, what does that mean?" "You have standing to challenge the will and file a civil claim. And if the district attorney reviews this," he paused, "it could become criminal." "I'm not suing anyone," I said. "Not yet." He studied me. "Then what do you need?" "I need to be ready." "For what?" "My father is planning something for Thanksgiving." Harlan gathered copies of everything into a thick packet and sealed it inside a large manila envelope. "If you ever need this," he said, sliding it across the desk, "it speaks for itself." That evening I called Aunt Ruth. "Would you come to Thanksgiving?" I asked. There was silence. "I haven't attended a family dinner in 9 years," she said. "I know." Another pause. "For Earl," she finally said. "I'll be there." Thanksgiving afternoon arrived cold and bright. Aunt Marlene's house on Pinewood Drive was already packed when I pulled into the driveway. Trucks lined the street. Kids ran through the yard. Inside, 3 long tables filled the living room. 32 place settings. The moment I walked in, conversation shifted. Not loudly, just a slight pause. A few quick glances. People looking away too fast. Everyone had heard the rumors. Gerald sat at the head of the table wearing a navy blazer like he was attending church instead of dinner. My mother sat beside him, eyes already glistening. Nolan stared at his plate. 15 minutes later, Aunt Ruth slipped quietly through the side door and took a seat at the far end of the table. Most people didn't even recognize her. I placed my bag under my chair. Inside it, the envelope rested against my ankle. Dinner began. Plates filled. Someone said grace. 20 minutes later, my father tapped his knife against his glass. The room fell quiet. He stood slowly and looked around the table. "Before we go around and say what we're thankful for," he began, "there's something this family needs to address." My pulse rose, but I stayed still. "Most of you have heard the rumors," he continued. "Denise and I tried to handle this privately, but our daughter left us no choice." Then he turned and pointed at me. "Our daughter Oilia is a thief," he said. "And we have proof." Gasps rippled through the room. My mother's crying grew louder. Gerald reached into his blazer and pulled out a white envelope. He walked around the table slowly until he stood beside my chair. "This is a court summons," he announced. "We are suing you for the return of my father's money." He said it in front of me. I opened it. At first glance, it looked official. Court header. Legal language. My full name typed neatly. But something was wrong. No case number. No clerk stamp. The paper was ordinary copy stock. It was fake. My father had staged the entire thing. I placed the paper down gently. Then I looked up at him. "Are you done?" I asked. I stood slowly and reached under my chair. My hand closed around the manila envelope. 4 months of truth. I placed it on the table beside his fake summons. And for the first time that night, I saw something shift in my father's eyes. I kept my voice steady. "He didn't leave it to you, Dad," I said. "He left it to us. All 4 of us. And you forged his will to take it." The room went completely still. I could hear the clock on Aunt Marlene's mantel ticking, each second louder than the last. At the far end of the table someone, maybe Danny's wife, quietly set her glass down and pushed her chair back like she was trying to leave without being noticed. Travis stared at the tablecloth, jaw clenched. Megan covered her mouth with both hands. Aunt Marlene folded her napkin carefully and placed it beside her plate. She slid her chair back a few inches, creating a small gap between herself and my father. Just inches. But the meaning was loud. Uncle Danny slowly turned toward Gerald. Only minutes earlier he'd offered to help him find a lawyer. "Gerald," he said carefully, "is any of this true?" My father looked around the table, at Marlene, at Danny, at Denise. My mother had stopped crying and was staring down at the table like she hoped it might swallow her whole. Gerald didn't answer. His eyes moved across the room, searching for someone still on his side. He didn't find anyone. "She's manipulating all of you," he snapped suddenly. "This is fabricated. She paid people to." "Then explain the money," I said quietly. $350,000. Where did it go?" He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. Then Nolan stood up. Every head in the room turned. My brother, 28 years old, quiet, the one who never picked sides, was standing halfway down the table with his phone in his hand. "I heard them," he said. His voice sounded tight, like he was holding it together by force. 2 months ago. In the kitchen. They didn't know I was in the garage." He looked directly at our parents. Dad said, "She can't prove anything. The will is filed. It's done." Gerald's voice cut in sharply. "Nolan don't." But Nolan kept going. "And Mom said, what if she gets a lawyer?" The room had gone so silent it felt heavy. And Dad said, "Then we go louder. We make her the villain. Nobody's going to believe her over us." Nolan tapped his phone and set it on the table. The recording began to play. My father's voice filled the room, muffled through a wall but unmistakable. "She can't prove anything. The will is filed. It's done." Then my mother's voice. "But what if she gets a lawyer?" And Gerald again. "Then we go louder. We make her the villain." The recording stopped. The silence afterward was deafening. My father sank into his chair like the strength had drained from his legs. My mother whispered, barely audible, "I told you this would happen." Not shame. Not regret. Anger. Directed at him. Standing there, watching my father unravel in front of 30 people, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt empty. This wasn't a courtroom. It was Thanksgiving dinner. These were people I'd known my entire life. But I understood something in that moment that had taken me 32 years to learn. Love doesn't mean letting someone destroy you. And silence isn't peace. It's permission. No one touched dessert that night. People left in waves. First the distant relatives, then cousins, then the uncles. Most didn't even say goodbye to my father. A few stopped to hug me on the porch. Travis squeezed my hand before he left. "We'll talk this week," he said quietly. "Megan found me near the driveway. If that will is real, and I think it is, then all 4 of us were robbed." "I know. I want a copy of that report. You'll have it tomorrow." Within a week, Travis and Megan had hired their own attorney. They filed a petition with probate court to reopen my grandfather's estate based on evidence of forgery and the existence of a legitimate earlier will. I didn't file the case. They did. I only gave them the truth. Their lawyer also examined the summons my father had dramatically slid across the table. No case number. No court stamp. No record in any county system. It wasn't legal paperwork. It was a prop. Your father tried to intimidate you with a document that has the legal weight of a restaurant menu, the attorney said bluntly. Gerald had staged a performance. But the real paperwork, the kind judges actually read, had been sitting in my envelope. 9 days after Thanksgiving, my lawyer sent my father a certified letter. It was simple and direct. Gerald Palmer had 60 days to refinance the house on Talmadge Road and remove my name from the mortgage. If he refused, we would file a lawsuit over the unauthorized use of my co-signature, including the $40,000 home equity loan he'd taken without my consent. By that point, Gerald had bigger problems. The estate was being reopened. His reputation in town had collapsed. And there was the possibility of criminal charges for estate fraud. He refinanced the house in 5 weeks. I got the notification sitting in the hospital break room between patients. My name had been removed from the mortgage. Effective immediately. I walked out to my car and sat in the parking lot for a long time. Then I cried. Not from happiness. From relief. 10 years of someone else's debt attached to my name, finally gone. My credit score began climbing almost immediately.
640.
Then 680. The bank estimated it would pass 700 within 6 months. For the first time in a decade, my financial life belonged to me again. A week before Christmas, I visited Aunt Ruth. She set a small shoebox on the kitchen table.
"These are yours," she said.
Inside were 11 letters. Every one written by my grandfather over the final 3 years of his life. He had written them to me but mailed them to Ruth because he knew Gerald was intercepting anything sent to my address. The first one began, "Offie, your daddy says you don't want to see me anymore."
"I don't believe that."
"But if it's true, I want you to know I'm not angry. I just miss you." The last letter was dated 2 months before he died. "I'm leaving the house and the savings to you kids. All 4 of you. If your father does something different, find Ruth. She's got the real one. I love you. I always did." I pressed my palms against the table and tried to breathe. For 3 years, he had written letters he believed I might never read. He never stopped loving me. The probate case reopened in January. Handwriting experts confirmed the same conclusion Linda had reached. The signature on the filed will was forged. Eventually, the estate was redistributed according to my grandfather's real will. After legal fees, each grandchild received about $82,000. It wasn't life-changing money, but it was honest money. I used mine as the down payment on a small 2-bedroom house half a mile from the hospital. 900 square feet, white siding, a green front door, and a porch just big enough for 2 chairs. When the loan officer handed me the paperwork, there was only one name on it.
Mine.
The first night, I sat on the living room floor with a pizza box and hung one thing on the wall, a framed photo of my grandfather at Lake Blackshire, holding a fishing rod and smiling like he always did. "Not bad, Grandpa," I said to the empty room. My father tried to rewrite my grandfather's story. He forged a signature, stole an inheritance, and nearly convinced an entire town I was the thief. But the truth is stubborn. Just like a real signature. It can't be forged forever, especially when someone keeps the original safe.